If you're over 60, take a moment and think about this. How many canned foods are sitting in your pantry right now? They look harmless, convenient, even healthy. A quick soup for lunch, fruit on the side, maybe a ready-made meal for those days you don't feel like cooking. It feels practical. It feels safe. But here's what many people don't realize. As we age, our bodies respond differently to sodium, added sugars, and heavily processed ingredients. Blood pressure can become more sensitive. Muscle mass naturally declines. Even the way we process nutrients begins to shift. That doesn't mean canned foods are bad or that you need to clear out your kitchen overnight. It simply means the choices you make inside that grocery aisle may matter more now than they did 20 years ago. And here's the good news. Not all canned foods are created equal. Some may be worth limiting, while others can actually support heart health, muscle strength, and even brain function when chosen wisely. Have you ever checked a label and felt unsure about what you were really looking at? Or wondered if those convenient options are helping you? Or just filling space on the shelf? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because what we're about to look at isn't about fear, it's about clarity. And once you see what experts are now paying closer attention to, you may never look at your pantry the same way again. So stay with me. Have you ever opened your pantry, reached for a can of soup or fruit, and paused for just a second, wondering if it's helping you stay strong or quietly working against you? For many adults over 60, canned foods aren't just convenient. They're practical, they're affordable, they're familiar. Some have been pantry staples for decades, and in busy weeks or lower energy days, they can feel like a lifeline. But here's something we don't always talk about. As we age, our bodies change in subtle but important ways. Blood pressure can become more sensitive to sodium. Muscle mass gradually declines. Blood sugar regulation may not be as flexible as it once was. Emerging nutrition research is also taking a closer look at how heavily processed foods may affect long-term wellness. That doesn't mean canned foods are bad. It doesn't mean you need to empty your shelves. What it does mean is this: knowing how to choose smarter options can make a meaningful difference over time. Let's start with something simple but powerful: sodium. Many canned soups, stews, pasta meals, and ready-made chili products contain surprisingly high levels of sodium. Public health discussions continue to highlight the connection between excess sodium intake and elevated blood pressure, especially in older adults. And here's what catches many people off guard. A single can of soup can contain a significant portion of the recommended daily sodium limit. As we age, our cardiovascular system can become more sensitive to salt. That doesn't mean everyone needs to eliminate sodium entirely. Sodium is essential. However, consistent high intake may make blood pressure management more challenging for some individuals. The tricky part is that canned meals don't always taste overly salty. The sodium is simply built into the recipe. That's why label awareness becomes so important. Even small differences between regular and low sodium versions can add up across weeks and months. And sodium isn't the only conversation gaining attention. In recent years, researchers have been studying what are called ultra-processed foods. These are products made with multiple refined ingredients, additives, preservatives, flavor enhancers, and stabilizers designed to extend shelf life and intensify taste. Many canned pasta dishes, meat mixes, and ready-to-eat meals fall into this category. Now, this doesn't mean every ultra-processed food automatically leads to poor health. Nutrition science rarely works in absolutes. However, patterns of high consumption have been associated in observational research with long-term health concerns. Experts are still exploring why. It may relate to ingredient quality, lower fiber content, higher sodium levels, or how these foods influence appetite regulation. For older adults who rely on convenience foods, sometimes due to mobility, energy, or cooking fatigue, this conversation matters. The goal isn't perfection, it's awareness. Choosing fewer heavily processed options and balancing them with simpler, whole food-based items may support overall dietary quality. Then there's sugar, especially in places we don't always expect it. Canned fruits can be a wonderful way to add vitamins and fiber to your diet. However, fruits packed in heavy syrup can contain significant added sugars. Even certain pasta sauces and baked beans include more sugar than many people realize. As we get older, stable blood sugar becomes increasingly important for maintaining steady energy levels and supporting metabolic health. Again, this isn't about fear, it's about small shifts, choosing fruit packed in water or its own juice instead of syrup. Looking for sauces labeled "no added sugar." These are subtle swaps, but over time, they can meaningfully reduce overall sugar intake. Another pantry category that deserves a thoughtful look is processed meats in a can. items like luncheon meats or certain meat-based spreads. Public health organizations continue to recommend moderation with processed meats due to their sodium content and use of preservatives. For many people, these foods are nostalgic. They've been part of family traditions for years. Enjoying them occasionally is a personal choice. The key message from current nutrition guidance is balance, not elimination, not guilt, just moderation within an overall varied diet. Now here's where the conversation shifts in a more empowering direction. One of the most important, and sometimes overlooked, health priorities after 60 is muscle preservation. Age-related muscle loss, sometimes referred to as sarcopenia, naturally occurs over time. Maintaining muscle mass isn't just about strength. It supports mobility, independence, balance, and overall quality of life. This is where certain canned foods can actually be helpful. Protein intake becomes increasingly important as we age. Some older adults unintentionally consume less protein than they need, especially if appetite decreases. Canned options like beans, lentils, salmon, tuna, and sardines can provide convenient, affordable protein sources. Canned salmon, particularly varieties that include the soft bones, also provides calcium along with omega-3 fatty acids. Sardines offer similar benefits. Beans bring fiber and plant-based protein into the mix. These nutrients support heart health, digestive health, and muscle maintenance, all areas that matter deeply in later decades of life. So instead of viewing the canned aisle as a danger zone, it may be more accurate to see it as a place requiring strategy. Low-sodium beans can support fiber intake, which many adults fall short on. Canned tomatoes, especially no-salt added versions, contain antioxidants like lycopene. Canned fish offers omega-3 fatty acids that are widely studied for their role in supporting cardiovascular and brain health as part of a balanced diet. The difference often comes down to the label, and this brings us to one of the most practical skills you can develop, a simple 3-step label scan. First, glance at sodium, compare brands. You'll often notice significant differences sitting side by side on the shelf. Second, check added sugars. Look specifically for the added sugars line on the nutrition label, not just total sugars. Third, scan the ingredient list length. Generally speaking, shorter lists with recognizable ingredients can signal a less heavily processed product. That's not a strict rule, but it's a helpful guideline. You don't need to analyze every gram or memorize complex formulas. Even spending 10 extra seconds reading a label can change the overall nutritional profile of your pantry over time. It's also important to acknowledge something human here. Convenience matters. Energy fluctuates. Some days, cooking from scratch simply isn't realistic. Health isn't built on one perfect meal. It's shaped by patterns. If most of your choices lean toward balanced, nutrient-dense options, occasional higher sodium or more processed meals aren't likely to define your long-term health trajectory. What matters more is consistency and awareness, and perhaps most importantly, removing guilt from the equation. Nutrition conversations sometimes drift into extremes. Sustainable health habits rarely come from fear. They come from clarity. If you're over 60, your priorities may look different than they did decades ago. Maintaining independence, supporting heart health, preserving muscle strength, keeping your mind sharp. The encouraging news is that small adjustments in everyday food choices, even within the canned aisle, can support those goals. So the next time you reach for a can, you don't need to feel suspicion, just curiosity, a quick label scan, a simple comparison, a thoughtful choice. Because informed decisions build confidence, and confidence supports long-term consistency. If this conversation resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might also be rethinking their pantry habits. I'd genuinely like to hear from you. Have you started checking labels more closely in recent years? Have you found lower sodium or no added sugar versions that surprised you? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Your experience might help someone else make a smarter choice. And in our next discussion, we're going to look at another everyday habit that quietly shapes long-term wellness after 60, something many people overlook entirely. But once you see it, you may never think about it the same way again.